So we've learned all the PHP basics, and we've learned about MySQL and PHP and how SQL statements are formed. Now it's time to mix the two together. So we're going to create a PHP file that connects to our company database, and we're going to be able to fetch information from it as well as pass information into it. So I'm going to go to my htdocs folder, and I'm just going to call this folder, I'll just call it connect. And inside there I'm going to create an index.php file. Alright, and I'm also going to open up PHP just so we can check on our database and values. So when we insert something through PHP, we can verify that it was inserted. So company, alright, so we have our three tables here. Let's open this up. Alright, so let me close up these files and throw in our PHP tags. So the first thing we want to do is create a connection. And we saw the syntax for this in the PowerPoint file. So we're going to create a variable called connect. And that's going to be equal to the MySQL connect function. And in that function we need 4 parameters. We need the host, which is going to be localhost, as I said it usually will. And then we need the username, which in my case was root, and password. We just have a dummy password. And then we want the database name, which was company. Alright, so that's all our database parameters. Now we want to check the connection. And we will do that with an if statement. Alright, so we want to say if MySQL connect ERR and O, and we want to put in our connect variable. Alright, so we're basically saying if there's any connection errors, then we want to echo failed to connect to database. And not only that, but we want the actual MySQL error. So we're going to concatenate on MySQL connect error. Alright, so that'll give us the actual connection error. So if we save this and we go to localhost/connect, and this is what we want. We don't want to see anything. Now let's go to the file and let's mess something up, like the password. Let's add an extra A. If we save that and we go back and reload, we get our failed to connect to database, which is coming from here, and then you can see the MySQL error is here. So it's saying access denied for the user root. Okay, so we're not getting access because the password's wrong. So we want to get rid of that. So we have the valid password, and now we have nothing. Now let's run a query. Let's run an insert. So to run a query, you want MySQL query, and what we want to do is we want to put in our connection variable. Now I have a snippets file because the next thing we need to put in is the actual query, and instead of typing them out, I think a snippets file would help. Alright, so I just want the query. Now what we put here, this query, is the same thing as if we were typing it into the SQL window in the PHP MyAdmin interface like we did in the last section. So we're saying insert into employees. We want to insert first name, last name, department, and email. And we're inserting these values. Jeff Dole, he's in programming, and his email. Alright, so if we save that and reload, we don't... Okay, so call to undefined function. Oh, I have a 1 here. This should be an I. Alright, so let's reload that. And we don't see anything, and that's perfectly fine. All we're doing is inserting a value into the database. So we can check that if we go to employees, and you can see here we have Jeff Dole, programming. Now if we run that again, if we reload that again, we're going to insert the row again. So anytime that page reloads, it's going to insert a new value. Obviously this isn't something that you would have live on a website. Alright, so we can actually delete them from PHP MyAdmin. Alright, so now what I want to do is, usually what's the most common is the select query, is to grab data from a database and display it in a web page. So let's get rid of this. And let's see, we want to do MySQL query. So it's set up the same kind of way. We want to put in the connection variable. And then we want to put in the select query. So let's just select all from employees. Alright, so now in order to do this, we need to grab the result. And actually, we should have done that. We want this to be put into a variable called result. Or it doesn't have to be called result, but in most cases, that's the common syntax. So now we have a result variable that's holding all of the fields from the employees table. So now what we have to do is do a loop. We need to loop through these. So we're going to say while. It's going to be a while loop. And we're going to say rows, while rows is equal to MySQL fetch array, and that's going to have the result inside of it. Alright, so basically what we're saying is, while there's still a row to be read in the database, do this. And all we want to do is echo out the first and last name. So we can say echo row, and row is an array, and which has all the values in the database. So we just want the first name. Okay, so echo row first name, and then we want to concatenate a space and then put the last name. Alright, so let's try that out. Okay, we get an error. Unexpected bracket on 13. Oh, that shouldn't be there. Okay, undefined variable row. Whoops, I'm sorry, this should be row, not rows. Alright, so now we have our names. Let's just throw in a concatenate on a BR tag. So now it's giving us the first and last name of all of the names in all of the values in our employees table. So that's pretty cool. Alright, so what I want to do now is I want to make this data a little neater. So what I want to do is create an actual table, an HTML table with all of the names, not only the names but the department and the email. So we can do that all in this while loop. but I'm going to use the PHP shorthand. So I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to end the PHP block there, and then start a new one. And I'm going to get rid of this curly brace and put in a colon and then an ending PHP tag. And then instead of this closing brace, we're going to say PHP end if. So now we can actually deal with HTML between these two. Okay, so we don't have to do echoes. We can just add straight HTML. When we need to, we'll create the PHP tags. So we're going to say table. We'll give it a width of 500, and we'll say cell padding equals 5, cell spacing equals 5, and border equals 1. So we'll have a nice table with all our data. So let's create the headings. So our first table row will have a table heading. Actually, let me just type all these out first. Alright, so we're going to have an ID for the employee. We're going to have the first name, last name, department, and email. Alright, so that's the table headings. And we actually want to take this while loop. We don't want the table in the while loop. We just want part of it in it. And that will be right after the closing table row tag. Just grab this. Alright, so we have a table with some headings. Now, for each row that's available to us in the database, we want to print out a table row with the information. Okay, so we're going to say tr, and we're going to say td. If you don't understand tables, I'd suggest going back to the HTML CSS section. So in here, in these columns is where we're going to put the dynamic data. So we need our PHP tags. We can echo row ID. Okay, so I'm just going to copy that. Okay, so after the ID, we want first name, last name, department, and email. And I noticed a big mistake here. I have end if. I'm not ending an if statement. I'm ending a while loop. So that has to be end while. So that's a huge mistake. Alright, so that looks good. Let's save this and see what happens. Alright, so now we have this nice table with our headings and then each row in the database. So if another row, if another employee gets added in our database, it's going to output right here. And this is how web applications are built. Portals and customer relation programs and CMS, all stuff like that. It all comes from this kind of technology. So what I want to do now is kind of do the same thing, but have a products table with the category name using join like we did in the last section. So at the top of this table, I'm just going to put an H1 tag that says employees, and then down here, products. Okay, so I can kind of copy this whole thing. Except we want the product, the category, and that's it. So this is going to be product, it's going to be name, and category. Now we haven't created the query for this yet to grab this, so we need to do that now. So let's copy this, and we want to put this query right here. Actually, we need our PHP tags. Okay, so results, MySQL query. So what I want to do is put in that query that had the join in it. So I'm going to say select products.name, comma, categories dot name as category. Okay, so that's going to be, now I'm going to space this out a little bit. These things can get really hard to read. So select as, actually that should be up there. We don't want that down here. We'll say from. Alright, so from employee, I'm sorry, from products, and we want to do a left join, and that's going to be the categories table on products dot category categories dot ID. All right, so that looks good. Okay, so that's the query. Then down here we're doing another while loop, and this result here is going to pertain to this one. So I'll save that. Okay, so we got a problem here, undefined index ID on line 51. Alright, and I know the reason for this is both our categories and product tables have an ID, so we have to select it as something else. So after this category, we want to select products.id as, we'll say prod ID. Alright, so then down here we should be able to put in prod ID. Save that. Alright, so now we have our employees and we have our products with not just the category number that's in the table, but the name, and that's coming from the categories table. So this is really the beginning of a company's employee management system or product management system, whatever you want. In the next section, we're going to be going over forms and how you can actually do this same stuff by inserting data into a form as opposed to just writing it, hard coding it in the file.